Today we're taking a look at Mahiru Shiina from The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten. This is the one-piece version by Banpresto. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten is a romance series built around a quiet, everyday relationship that gradually becomes warmer and more intimate. Within that story, Mahiru stands out for her calm presence, soft way of speaking, and the refined atmosphere she carries even in simple moments. That balance of gentleness, restraint, and elegance gives her a very distinctive presence. Today's highlights for this figure are the beautifully flowing long hair expressed with clear parts and paint, the softly lifting skirt, and the posing. The first highlight is the long hair. The hair begins under the wide hat, then spreads outward in multiple thick sections that gradually separate toward the tips. Because the ends become lighter and more transparent, the large volume still keeps a sense of air and motion instead of turning into one heavy shape. The second highlight is the skirt. Rather than simply hanging straight down, the dress opens strongly toward the front and curves upward at the hem, making the underside visible in places. The pale blue shading follows the folds and pushed out surfaces, so the sense of wind and movement stays readable across the wide white dress. The third highlight is the posing. One hand rises close to the face while the other drops lower holding the sandals, creating a clear vertical flow through the figure. The hat, hair, skirt, and ribbon tails all open in the same direction, so the whole piece feels unified by one continuous movement. This channel brings you figure reviews and anime merchandise updates straight from Japan. If you enjoyed this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe. The head is built around a very quiet expression, and the face keeps that softness by avoiding any sharp or exaggerated movement in the features. The eyes are large and rounded, with the upper lines drawn clearly enough to frame the gaze, while the inside of each iris layers warm amber and orange tones against a darker outer ring. That color separation draws attention directly into the center of the face, and because the highlights remain small and clean, the eyes feel bright without becoming overly flashy. The mouth is kept very small and slightly open, more like a soft breath caught in the wind than a strong smile or surprise, and that choice works well with the restrained nose, which appears only as a gentle rise at the center of the face. Light blush marks on the cheeks support that expression without expanding too far across the facial surface, so the face remains open and smooth instead of crowded. After that, the hair takes over as the main visual feature of the head. The bangs are divided into many narrow strands, each ending at a slightly different length, so the line across the forehead does not look cut straight across. At the top of the head, one short strand curves upward into the open space under the hat, giving the upper silhouette a small point of motion before the much larger flow of the hair begins. Around the face, separate side strands fall forward toward the chest, while others extend outward near the lifted hand, so even near the cheeks the hair is already layered rather than treated as one flat front section. From under the hat, the rear hair expands dramatically into long, thick sections that sweep behind the body and outward into open air. These larger strands begin close together near the head, then gradually separate toward the ends, and the tips become thinner, sharper, and lighter in color. Some strands bend outward, some dip downward, and some curl slightly back inward, which keeps the long hair from reading as a single stiff curtain. The clear treatment near the ends helps preserve that sense of air, and the paint transition keeps the long volume readable while still feeling light. The hat itself also plays a major role in the head presentation. Its broad white brim changes height around the outer edge instead of forming a perfect even circle, and the underside is painted a pale blue that clearly separates the upper surface from the inner plane. Around the crown, a blue band wraps cleanly around the hat and is gathered by a matching bow, giving the large white shape a small but clear accent near the outer side. The upper body is arranged with a very clean, graceful layout, and much of its appeal comes from how clearly each clothing layer is separated around the shoulders and chest. The neckline opens widely, and the blue trim running along the top edge of the dress marks a very clear boundary between skin and fabric. Separate from that trim, thin shoulder straps rise over the shoulders, so the dress does not rely on one single line to describe the entire top area. Instead, the upper section is built from multiple readable elements: the blue neckline band, the thin straps, the exposed shoulders, and the soft off-shoulder sleeves sitting lower on the arms. Those sleeves expand outward into rounded forms, then gather again at the cuffs into small ruffled edges, so the shoulder area already shows a layered progression from bare skin to trim to puffed fabric to the smaller frilled edge below. The front of the torso stays simple in arrangement but not flat in shape. 4 blue buttons run straight down the center from the upper chest toward the waist, giving the dress a strong central axis that remains visible even though the lower half opens widely in motion. The white fabric around that button line does not stay completely smooth. It curves gently over the chest, then tightens slightly as it approaches the waist seam, where the cloth gathers into the beginning of the skirt. Because of that shift, the front surface changes from broader rounded planes at the top to tighter gathered folds below, and the dress keeps a sense of structure without looking stiff. One arm lifts upward with the elbow bent so the hand rests close to the hair and ear area. The palm turns inward and the fingers stay softly aligned, which allows the hand to echo the direction of the flowing side strands rather than interrupt them. On that wrist, a very thin bracelet circles the arm and holds a small flower-shaped ornament at the center, adding a delicate point of detail without thickening the silhouette. The opposite arm falls lower along the side of the body and extends slightly behind, where the open fingers hold the sandals by their straps. That means the line of the arm does not simply end at the hand, but continues into the suspended shape of the shoes. Around the back of the waist, a tied ribbon introduces another set of moving elements. The central knot sits clearly against the rear of the dress, while the loops and long ribbon tails separate outward into different directions, adding extra movement behind the torso instead of leaving the back plain. The lower body is dominated by the dress, and the strongest feature is how the skirt does not simply drop downward, but pushes outward in a large wind-swept curve. From the waist seam, the fabric expands quickly toward the front, and the most advanced section of the hem lifts high enough that the underside becomes visible. Because the hem edge turns upward so clearly, the dress does not read as a thin printed surface. It has a readable outer face, an inner face, and a visible edge between them, which gives the moving skirt more physical presence. The outer silhouette of the hem is also not circular or evenly distributed. Some sections project strongly, others settle lower, and others curl inward, so the skirt changes height as it travels around the figure. That irregular rhythm is important because it keeps the motion from feeling symmetrical or staged. The pale blue shading across the lower half is handled in a way that supports the sculpt rather than covering it. Instead of tinting the entire dress evenly, the blue gathers along pushed forward surfaces and into the valleys of the folds, so the viewer can follow where the fabric is being stretched and where it is folding back into itself. This gives the broad white skirt a clear directional flow. That movement becomes even more effective because other elements overlap the dress in the same zone. The long ribbon tails from the back of the waist sweep around the outside of the skirt, and the ends of the long hair descend near the hem from behind, so the lower half is not shaped by the skirt alone. It becomes a layered area where hair, ribbon, and dress all move in related directions while remaining visually separate. The sandals held in the lowered hand add another small but important detail near the hem. Their thick straps, raised heels, and contrasting sole surfaces remain easy to read, so they do not collapse into a single dark shape even though they are relatively small. The legs themselves are arranged very simply but effectively. One leg comes down more directly toward the front, while the other trails behind at an angle, so the two lower leg lines do not mirror each other. The feet are bare, and the front foot shows the toes, arch, and heel clearly, while the rear foot lifts the heel and points more through the front part of the foot. Beneath the front foot, two transparent cylindrical supports hold the sole from below without hiding its shape, while the rear foot meets the base more lightly near the front. That difference helps the lower body keep its airy motion while still presenting the foot shapes clearly. This figure is approximately 20 centimeters tall. That's about 7.9 inches. For size comparison, here's a 350 milliliter can. That's about 12 ounces in the US. Overall, Mahiru Shiina by Banpresto stands out because this figure brings together a calm expression, beautifully flowing long hair, and a dress silhouette that carries the motion of the pose across the entire piece. The face leaves a very gentle first impression. The rounded eyes use layered warm tones that pull attention toward the center, while the small, slightly open mouth keeps the expression quiet and delicate rather than overly dramatic. The nose remains subtle, the blush stays light, and that restraint helps the face feel open and soft from the start. The hair then becomes the main visual driver of the figure. The bangs are split into many fine strands across the forehead. A short strand rises softly at the top of the head, and the long rear section spread outward in thick flowing parts that gradually separate toward the ends. Because the tips become lighter and partially transparent, the large hair volume still keeps a sense of air instead of becoming visually heavy. The upper body works especially well because the clothing layout is easy to read even while the figure is in motion. The blue trim at the neckline creates a firm border against the skin, while the thin shoulder straps remain clearly separate from that upper band. The off-shoulder sleeves add another layer through their rounded volume and gathered cuffs, so the shoulders and chest do not rely on one single simple outline. The torso itself stays slender and clean, and the vertical line of the four buttons gives the front a strong center that anchors the composition. One arm lifts toward the hair, which supports the softness of the head area, while the other lowers toward the side and connects directly to the sandals. That contrast in arm height helps the figure avoid stiffness and gives the upper half a graceful vertical rhythm. The lower body is where the full sense of motion comes together most clearly. The skirt expands strongly from the waist, projects outward, and turns up at the hem so the underside becomes visible, giving the dress a much stronger feeling of movement than a simple downward fall would have. The pale blue shading follows the fold structure and the pushed surfaces of the cloth, so the viewer can trace how the dress is opening into the wind. The ribbon tails at the back of the waist continue that movement rather than stopping it, and the long hair descends close to the hem, adding yet another flowing layer around the lower half. The sandals provide a small but effective secondary detail because the straps, sole surfaces, and heels remain readable even at that scale. The bare feet also help the figure keep a light seasonal feeling, and the transparent supports under the front foot preserve the shape of the sole instead of hiding it behind a bulky connection. What makes the figure especially successful is the way all the major lines move together. The brim of the hat, the sweep of the hair, the lift of the skirt, the ribbon tails, and the sandals all open in the same general direction, so the eye can move naturally from the head to the lower body and then outward into the surrounding silhouette. Because of that, fans of Mahiru Shiina or The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten will definitely enjoy this piece. Collectors who appreciate soft facial expression work, elegant long hair flow, and wind-swept dress movement should find it a very satisfying addition. That's it for this video. If there's any part of the figure you liked, feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.